For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind. By the might of his inexhaustible armies, 1,000,000 worlds stand against the dark. Yet he is a rotting carcass, the carrion lord of the Imperium, held in life by marvels from the dark age of technology, and the thousands of souls sacrificed each day so that his may continue to burn. To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. It is to suffer an eternity of carnage and slaughter. It is to have cries of anguish and sorrow drowned by the thirsting laughter of dark gods. This is a dark and terrible era where you will find little comfort or hope. Forget the power of technology and science. Forget the progress of advancement. Forget any notion of common humanity or compassion. There is no peace amongst the stars, for in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Hey friends, it's me, the Ebony Otaku, the well-rounded nerd. First, let me say many thank yous for the big jump in subscribers and views over the Halloween weekend. I thoroughly appreciate it, especially with the mistake I made with one video. You know what? A good audience is forgiving. We all make mistakes, right? Yeah, it happens. But no, I am super excited because it looks like my channel is finally starting to gain some legs and grow, which is super exciting because I like doing this. I am not making any money from this at all. I do it because I like it. Because I'm a nerd, obviously, who likes sharing nerdy things, which is why I like to call myself the well-rounded nerd. Speaking of being a well-rounded nerd, I have picked up a new novel. Let's talk about why I picked up this novel and why I'm bringing it to the channel. So in my most recent reading, a viewer commented that they wished their girlfriend was into Warhammer. To each their own. I respect it. Well-rounded nerd respects all the franchises and nerdiness out there. But the second statement is what we're going to talk about. Apparently, the girlfriend felt that Warhammer was written primarily to men. Well, that's an interesting point. Is it primarily just written for men? Or is there more to this universe? Of course there is. Let's talk about it. So I picked up this novel here. It's called Minka-lesque. I picked it up about 8 or 9 weeks ago. No, maybe it was about 10 weeks ago. Just to have, some more reading. I am still reading Fabius Bile. Haven't gotten a chance to finish it. I'm going camping next week and I've got a few days off. So one of my favorite things to do while camping is to sit by the campfire, drink my whatever, and absorb a good book. So I'm hoping I can get through the first book in the Fabius Bile omnibus that day. And I'm also hoping that I can get through the first book in this omnibus as well. So we're not abandoning Fabius. We are not abandoning our conversation about Eisenhorn. I'm really enjoying that one, by the way. I just thought that right now I was going to mention this one. This isn't going to be regular reading on the channel right now. I'm just using it for today's example because I think it is pertinent to the conversation at hand on whether or not Warhammer is only for men. Because the main character is a female, if you didn't notice. But then also, our interest in the nerdy arts that are out there. There's something for everyone in the nerdverse. But I would caution any of us to be careful about drawing firm lines about what we will or won't allow ourselves to enjoy because we assume it's only targeting a particular demographic. Let's talk about what I mean by that. So let's back up into Warhammer lore a little bit. I have no idea when you're jumping into my channel. I make the assumption that everyone who watches knows something about some of the nerdity that I discuss. But you know what? There's a lot of people on this planet, and I know that not all of them have read all the books, so that's fine. So for those who are unindoctrinated into the Warhammer universe, it is set minimal 30,000 years into the future, and then 40,000 years into the future, so way far away from now. And in the future, part of the reason there is only war is humans have left Earth. Earth has become a husk of a planet, and at some point around where you and I exist, a couple of thousand years from now, humans have left Earth and started colonizing across the known galaxy on planets that were habitable. And evolution doing what it does, those humans, some retained their, what we would call humanity, someone we could look at and go, yep, that's a person. And then others evolved in different ways. That being set aside, over the course of human history, there have been many a figure to rise up, to take control and reign over the humans. And in the Warhammer universe, that figure is the Emperor of Mankind, who, according to Warhammer lore, is out here walking around on Earth somewhere right now, like fighting in a war or something. Like he's just out being great. He's a perpetual, meaning a being that if his husk was to pass away, he could be reborn. Vulcan is another perpetual. John Grammaticus is another perpetual. They die, they come back. They die, they come back. They die, they come back. And thus they are basically the true immortal. There's very little that can kill real perpetuals out there. But that's a whole other set of stories to talk about on another day. That being said, as the Black Library built up this universe around the Emperor of Mankind, he's established basically as the god figure. The Emperor himself, when he speaks and when he's around, puts forth that he never wanted to be seen as a religious figure. In fact, because he's been around for basically all of human history, he's decided that religion's dangerous, don't want it, want no parts of it, like put it in a corner and just no, and basically outlaws it. Except for the Mechanicum, they're allowed to worship the machine god, but they also make all the bullets. So we just let them do what they want out there on Mars. Be as worshipful of the machines as you want. Just keep sending us weapons. But when the Emperor is finally killed at the end of the Horus Heresy, which they're finally writing now. It's only been 25 years. It's fine. He doesn't completely die. His body is entombed in a massive machine that keeps his spirit and psychic presence alive. His psychic presence is very important because the Emperor is also the most long-lived human that we know about. He's someone who was aware of chaos and the warp. And the quickest way to get from one end of the galaxy to another, if you're out there trying to conquer, is through the warp. It basically warps space so that what was this, to go from that end to that end, now we folded it on itself and you can go straight through. That's a wormhole. That's what it does. But to do it safely, you need a guide. And when the Emperor was alive, he was the guide through the warp. They call it the Astronomicon. It's basically a VPN for spaceships. If I was at a place where I was being sponsored, that would have been a perfect transition for like one of those companies. Anywho. But yeah, it's basically a space VPN. Give you a private tunnel through this dangerous space called the warp. But why does the Emperor know about the warp? When he's entombed on Terra, in order to keep his psychic presence alive, like 1,000 psychics are sacrificed to him every single day. Like basically their life force is used to keep him alive so that the path can stay open. The future is brutal. Okay? It's just brutal. Before all of that happens, the Emperor, in order to conquer the known galaxy, to reunite all of humanity, he knew that was going to require war. Because there were 3 things that were going to happen when the Emperor would show up to a planet and say, hey, you're humans, be in my Imperium. They would accept him, they would question him, or they would reject him. Those are the only options. If they would accept the emperor, yay, you're part of the Imperium of Man. All the benefits thereof. Send us your children to be sacrificed in wars. If they questioned him, negotiations would happen. The back, the forth, the back. Let's decide if we want to do this. Hopefully they're going to say yes. And if they said no, there would be war. Now, initially, the emperor's out doing this on his own, but he's like, you know what? There's a lot of planets out there. I can't be bothered all the time. So the emperor takes his own genetic material and implants it into 20 beings. We're calling them beings, even though they start out as babies, and they never say who the mother of these babies are, but 20 beings who are the Primarchs. The Primarchs are the direct genetic sons of the emperor, each one of them basically having a piece of who the emperor is in them. And here's where the genius of the Black Library and the beginning of expanding this universe to appeal to anyone comes into play. Warhammer isn't just a novella universe. It's not just lore. It's also a tabletop game where you can build figures. Do I have any Warhammer up here on my desk? Yes, I do. I have a Necron cruiser. Yeah, I painted this. This I used to play Aeronautica Imperialis. So, there he goes. Anywho, so the emperor has created these genetic sons so that he can raise them up to be his great generals, and then under them bring up the Legiones Astartes, the Space Marines. So let's follow it. Emperor genes into Primarchs. Primarchs genes into their legions. And that is a hierarchy. So functionally, the emperor is the grandfather of all of the Space Marines, like if you really want to think about it like that. But when the emperor was creating his offspring in their incubation chambers in the Himalayan mountains, the Himalayas, deep underground, a warp storm somehow opened in the emperor's palace, and just all 20 of his little sons went away and were scattered across the universe. Did it happen intentionally? Was it really a theft of the newborns? We do not know. I tend to subscribe to the theory that the emperor intentionally wanted his sons scattered so they would grow up among the humans and have empathy for them. That way their first reaction upon encountering a world that did not want to be loyal would not be to just drop bombs. That they would, be like, oh, well, humans have a way. Maybe we can talk it out. But that's what really makes the Black Library and the Warhammer universe so interesting. So those 20 Primarchs represent the 20 legions. And the legions are very distinct. 2 of the Primarchs are missing. They have gone away. Once in a while in a book, you'll hear a couple of Primarchs mention their brothers that we don't talk about. They don't talk about Bruno. Okay, that's who these Primarchs are. They're just gone. There's a reason for that. And this is where everyone can now start seeing themselves somewhere in the Warhammer universe. The 18 legions that remain, each of those Primarch infants were sent out across the known universe, and each landed on a very distinct human world. Jagatai Khan, the Great Khan, the leader of the White Scars, basically grew up in Siberia. All right. He grew up in Amyakan. So if you identify with that type of culture, that type of creed, you might find commonality and joy in learning about Jagatai Khan and the White Scars and the nobility and history of that legion and how they came to be what they are. If you are someone who's all about the display, the beauty of what could be, the art of things, well, then you might find appeal in the Emperor's Children, headed by Fulgrim, who we just talked about, the one of who considers himself to be the most beautiful. It's really Sanguinius. But when he landed on his planet, the parents that found him in his little pod, when they opened it up, they just decided the baby was a god because this was the most beautiful child that ever existed. Ever, no other child. And they just basically made him God when he landed. That's the short version. Or perhaps you would look to Vulcan and his salamanders. of their ebony skin, their planet of hunters, of very strong brute force, people you would not want to face in battle. Or maybe you're someone who's had a tough time in life, who had circumstances beyond you raise you. So you might look at Angron and why he's angry and investigate these butcher's nails, which represent things being put upon you that you didn't ask for, but somehow becoming triumphant. But wait, those are all still men. We also see the creation of the Adeptus Sororitas. The Adepta, see that A on the end denotes female. They're basically the female space marines. Well, they get their own legions. They do. It's a whole thing. But the beauty of the Black Library and the Warhammer universe is recognizing how to celebrate the uniqueness of every type of person. So whether you lean towards the Space Marine legions and can find yourself in one of those legions, or you can understand the heaviness of the burden the Emperor of Mankind has given himself, or maybe you're like me, you're a female trying to get into this world and understand it, there's the Adepta Sororitas, who have the ability to make war, honestly, where the men can't, simply because of their size and nothing else. Or perhaps where they can show mercy where their Space Marine counterparts may not have shown mercy. And then there's the Sisters of Silence. They don't talk because they don't make their presence known. They are women who are born with a negative psychic space, so that if others with psychic abilities or even denizens of the warp are around them, they don't know they're there. They are basically a human force field against psychic energy, and they are able to make war and go on missions that the Space Marines, especially those who don't practice any kind of psychic ability, they never could. So the way that the Black Library and the Warhammer universe is set up, it's so ingenious. They wanted everyone to be able to see themselves somewhere in the universe. And the two legions that are just gone missing, that left space that when you are creating your army, where'd he go? That when you're building your army, when you are deciding on your machinery and your warband and your colors and everything else, well, if none of those appeal to you, well then what is you? What is your unique voice that you can add to the universe? And in gameplay and stuff, there is allotment for the created. But what if you don't really see yourself in any of the human that's okay. There's other armies. We have the Eldar, which are basically the elves of the Warhammer universe. We have the orcs, who are the orcs. Okay, here we go. Here we go. Orcs are fun. Orcs are fun. You know, they're out there kit bashing everything. We've got the Tau. There are myriad Xenos races that you can have. You can play as the Mechanicum, loyal to no one but yourself. Why do I say all of this? For anyone who would look at a franchise and say, well, I can't see myself in there, so I can't experience it, I would challenge you to experience the franchise. The creators of the Warhammer universe have done a very good job of creating a world where anyone can find themselves. I've said it before in other videos, and especially when times get tough, something that we always need to embrace is escapism. There's a lot going on out there. Look at me and my eyeballs. There's a lot going on. You might be going through something right now. I have no way of knowing. You don't know what's going on in my life. But something we can all do is grab a book. They give books away now. They literally do. They're like, this is like a free resource now. We can grab books and escape from whatever's happening out there for 30 minutes, an hour, a half hour, and at the same time, we're exercising our brains. the book that got me into the Warhammer universe was Eisenhorn, which is part of the reason I'm going back and revisiting so much of it, because it's just, he's a fun character and he brings other fun characters with him. So Eisenhorn is this great inquisitor, but his right hand is Bakwa Kinska. She is one of those silent sisters who doesn't know she's a sister silent until like he gets a hold of her. But she goes on incredible missions with him, and she is integral to the success of his missions. And they have a little thing going on, of course they do. But there are all kinds of characters. One of my other favorite characters is John Grammaticus, the other perpetual. I know there's a whole thing about him, but I love John Grammaticus, okay? Fight me. But he, being a perpetual, he's probably as long-lived as the Emperor of Mankind, or close to it, because he actually met the Emperor of Mankind at some point during our known history. So back here in the year not 40,000, not 30,000, not even 20,000. He's known of and seen the existence of the Emperor for that long. And he has seen how humans have evolved and how they affect the rest of the known universe. So he's kind of got a toe in wanting to do what's right for humanity, but he also has a whole leg in helping Xenos forces curve the destiny of humans, and he shows up in a lot of books. In the future, there is only war. Why make an entire universe around just warring? Because if you look at human history, that is something that has always been constant. It doesn't matter how civilized, advanced, or knowledgeable we become, humans always bring themselves back to their most basest of traits and instincts. I see a thing I want, it was denied me, I'm gonna go take it. That is the short version of war. And in the Warhammer universe, it takes several forms. So the Emperor has created his sons. They've been scattered across the galaxy. He eventually embarks on a mission in his reunification of the human race, but also to find his missing sons. The first he encounters is Horus, and for a few centuries, it's just him and Horus and those legions out there having a great time conquering the galaxy. But one at a time, they find the Primarchs, and one of three responses happens. They bow the knee, they question, or they say no. That's all that can happen. Most of the Primarchs, when they're discovered on their worlds, even though they arrived as babies, like 10 minutes after they arrive, they're grown. I'm being facetious there, but very quickly, because of their genetic enhancements, they go from being infants to children to grown men who have taken over their respective planets in like a matter of months. It's kind of crazy when you read some of their stories. Like Fulgrim didn't lift a finger to take over. They were just like, oh, he's pretty, let's follow him. Pretty privilege exists even in space, in a time of war, okay? But as he encounters his sons, many of them, when the Emperor sets foot on their planet, they're like, that's my daddy. Like, they just know. That, like, no paternity court needed. Like, they know that's him, bow the knee. There are others who are like, prove it. And then you got your Angrons and your Mortarions and your Perturabos who are like, okay, you the Emperor? Fight me. and if you win, then I'll bow the knee. And those are sons that were probably never loyal, honestly, because they have their own thing going. Who is this person that shows up? And then you have to consider the rest of humanity. As you read more into the lore in these different Warhammer universes, and you encounter these different evolutions of humans, some of them have evolved so far beyond human, we probably couldn't even call them human. They don't feel a connection to the human race. I would liken that, just coming from the place of I can only speak for me and my experiences, but I don't identify as being African. I hear people talk about going back to the homeland. I'm like, look, however I got here, I'm American. Obviously. You know, I was born into this culture. This is what I know. I am a football watching, barbecue loving, fried chicken making, like camping, long road trips. That's my culture. I don't know anything about living in Africa, although I study it. I find it fascinating. Some of my favorite authors have come out of the Dark Continent. But I couldn't go there. And let me say it differently. Someone from there couldn't come here and say, you need to reunify with Africa. They wouldn't, for one thing, because I'm too far separated. In fact, most of us who are the descendants of slaves, we are so genetically removed from Africans that we don't even look like people from any of those countries. I don't look Nigerian. I don't look Ghanaian. I don't look Kenyan. I don't have the genetic markers that would make me Egyptian or Ugandan or Congo. I don't look like anyone there, because we are basically our own race now. That's why Americans who are African descended, who are descended from slaves, that's why African American doesn't always fit. Because I'm probably 300 years removed from Africa. I'm a Black American. I'm an American. And that's what's happening as the emperor and his sons show up to these planets. So first he has to convince his own sons that he's the ruler, but then he has to convince these humans who are 10 or 20,000 years separated from Earth that they need to be part of the kingdom. Well, how would you feel if someone from a country from your family's long history came up and told you, you need to bow the knee to so-and-so that you know nothing about? Exactly. There would be war. And that's what makes the Horus Heresy my favorite portion of the Warhammer lore as a total, because it shows what happens when even the best leaders let their hubris take over and fail to recognize the human condition and understand how people are going to react. There is no leader, no human so great that they are above having other humans react to them in a human way. The emperor decides, hey, all right, this reunification thing is going pretty good. Hey, Horus, be in charge of your brothers. You're the war master now. Think I've blessed you. Now I'm going to trot off back to Terra and do my experiments. That was a mistake. Because when was the last time your parents left you home with your siblings and said, this sibling's in charge, listen to them? I don't recall ever doing what my brother said when my parents left him in charge. And that's basically the elementary version of what happens. The emperor left Horus in charge. And they're still human. Even though they are genetically enhanced humans, they are very long-lived. They are the most beautiful demigod versions of a human that could exist. There's still a human seed in them. Even though the emperor is the greatest of humans to exist, he's still human and can still make mistakes. His mistake was implicit trust in Horus's abilities and that his sons would remain loyal and follow. Even before Horus became War Master, there were legions and primarchs who had already turned Lorgar. There were already seeds of treachery looking for a place to sneak in, and chaos exploited the emperor abandoning the battlefield for his own experiments. Not only did the emperor leave the battlefield, but the emperor then became more secretive. He wasn't telling his sons what he was doing. Parents don't have to tell their kids everything they're up to. But if it's going to affect whether or not your kid does the right thing, I might tell them, you know. And because he was gone, there was no guidance. There was no father watching his children. There's a metaphor. Chaos was allowed to proliferate. And over time, in the Imperium of Man, more and more types of warriors had to be created. And all of us can find ourselves in those different types of warriors. And even beyond that, we see so many amazing characters, especially amongst the human characters. Another great comment I got in the last Fulgrim video, that Fulgrim novel, which I think is fourth or fifth in the Horus Heresy series, it has some of the best human characters in all of Warhammer. And it's not even so much that the characters are great, But the cost of another person's decisions are on full display in Fulgrim. Fulgrim's Legion, the Emperor's Children, the ones who love perfection, they allowed remembrancers access, those who were poets, artists, and the like, who were literally tasked with remembering the exploits of war that the legions were getting up to. They allowed access unlike any other legion. But because of that, they were also some of the greatest victims of Fulgrim's decisions and his legion's fall to chaos. There's always human collateral when leaders do the wrong thing. There's human collateral when leaders do the right thing. And that's what makes the Warhammer universe so amazing. Everyone can find their place in it, be it among the demigods and the greatest, be it amongst those who support the Imperium, amongst the Xenos who are outcast, or even amongst our myriad human characters who are simply the victims of what's going on around them. So that brings us to this book. I'm just going to read the prologue, and this is a cold reading. I have not read this book yet. Look at how new and pretty it is. I mean, new. My other book, y'all have seen Fulgrim. Fulgrim is tore up because I've read it so much. But we're going to do a cold reading out of the prologue. And the reason I want to do that for this week is if you question whether or not you can find yourself, just the cover of this book tells me that there is a different type of story that even I haven't experienced yet in the Warhammer universe. There's so many books. I haven't read them all. I've read a lot, but not all of them. Maybe this might be a good one to pick up and try. Let us experience it together and see if it might be one that interests you. Minka Lesk, The Last White Shield, by Justin D. Hill. Reading from the first book, Cadia Stands. Prologue. Borders of the Segmentum Obscurus. She is 4. It is time to learn. Her father lifts her into the night sky. On other planets, the vision above would have been a velvet black sky, the cold white light of 10,000 stars, or the strange beauty of a crescent moon. But she is Cadian, and the sky is not dark and star-studded. It glows with the swirling, lurid bruise of the eye of terror that stares back down like a cyclops orb. The only twinkle comes not from stars, but from reflected sunlight catching the adamantium plates of low-orbit defense platforms. She starts to tense. Sometimes the eye is purple, sometimes green, sometimes darker patches of unnamed color. Her father's voice brings her back. That is the eye of terror. The prison of our enemy, he hisses. We are the padlock that keeps them trapped. That is why they hate us. All of us, she asks. All, he says. There's a long pause as she stares upwards. Even Mother? Yes, he tells her. Even Mother. There is a pause. She tastes blood in her throat. She wipes her nose, and her finger comes away smeared with red. She cannot stop staring into the eye, even though she feels sick. She knows that this test that she must pass, and she will not give up. Does he hate me? She asks, sniffing the blood back. Yes, the despoiler hates you. There is another pause. He wants to take our world from us. His voice is close to her ear. She can feel the breath of his words on her skin and in the tangled curls of her hair. He is passing on what he learned as a child. The despoiler wants our world to burn. Vomit rises in her throat. She swallows back the bile and stares deep into the darkest pits of the iris, as if looking for a face there, a being to whom she can address her words. At first, she sees nothing. But then, there, in the darkest patches of purple light, there is a plume of pale clouds. "What do you see?" her father demands, but she cannot speak as she gasps for breath. Her fingers are tight. "Speak, child. Have faith. The Emperor protects." The breath comes with a sudden shock as blood begins to drip from her nostrils. "A face," she says, her voice beginning to break with fear. She squirms for a moment. She wants this to stop, but his hands are firm on her arms. He holds her up for a little longer. "That is the despoiler," he tells her, and lifts her higher into the air. "What do you want to say to him, who hates us all and wants to burn this world?" Blood begins to pour from her nostrils. She will not look away. She will not give up. "Never," she says. "I cannot hear you." "Never," she says, louder this time. "Tell him." The child shouts up to the night sky. "Never, never." The father brings his daughter down and holds her tight against his chest, sections of his flank armor. "Well done, child," he says, and he feels relief. It is not easy to expose a child to such things. He watches as his daughter walks back to their hob. He is a Cadian and a father. He has done his duty. For her, the true test is yet to come. See, that's how you open a novel. Okay? I am very excited to take this on my camping trip and get through the first one. After I finish up talking about Fabius and Eisenhorn, I think this might be our next candidate to bring onto the channel, along with our love of Horus Heresy. So this obviously is going to be a central female protagonist, and she apparently, and I have not read this, she apparently belongs to a band of Cadians whose job it is to keep a watch on the Eye of Terror, especially Abaddon the Despoiler. So last bit of Warhammer history, just to get you into it. Wet your whistle for what we're going to explore in this book. Well, in a few weeks when I get to it. But again, introducing you to a novel that might get you into Warhammer if you are, hesitant. So Abaddon the Despoiler was one of the 4 Morninval. The Morninval were basically the cabinet for Horus when he was blessed by the Emperor to take over the wars in the stars to reunite the humans. The Morninval consisted of 4 of his closest commanders. Ezekiel Abaddon, Horus Aximond, who was also called Little Horus because he looked just like Horus, but there were several in the Legion who did, but he got to be Little Horus, and his name was also Horus. We also have Tarek Turgadin, and then we have Garviel Loken. Those 4 characters are central to the first 3 books in the Horus Heresy. I love the connection because all these books are written by different authors and yet they keep it fluid. It's great. 2 of Horus's Morninval sided with him in betraying the emperor. That would be Horus Aximond, Little Horus, and Ezekiel Abaddon, who eventually becomes Abaddon the Despoiler. Fun fact, I just talked about, the Commander deck for Magic. That is a Warhammer deck. This is the Imperial deck. There is also a Chaos deck, and Abaddon the Despoiler is the commander in that deck, and I must have it. Just cause. But then there is Garviel, Loken, and Tarek Tregadden. They did not side with Horus. And in fact, on Istvan 5, which we just looked at in Fulgrim, there were a bunch of legions there that day. Some traitors, some loyal, and then amongst the legionaries, you don't know who's who, honestly. It's 2 against 2 at some point on Istvan 5, where the Morninval who are loyal to Horus basically face off against the ones who are disloyal to Horus, but loyal to the Emperor. The way Horus orchestrates Istvan 5, he thinks he has total victory. No one's coming out of that alive, but some manage to escape. And the book that directly follows the Horus Heresy books, Flight of the Eisenstein, is the story of some of those characters that lived, including Garviel Loken, fleeing through the warp, trying to be undetected to haul butt back to Terra to let the Emperor know that Horus has betrayed them. And even the Eye of Terror itself, which is, a warp storm that is perpetual in space, where denizens of the warp at some point can enter and exit real space freely, even that being named, that was actually done by Perturabo, which that's a whole other Primarch, whole other legion, but one of our own Primarchs named the Eye of Terror, and it was split wide open by another Primarch. But because of what they've done, there comes a point where those who betrayed the Emperor, when they're finally beaten back, they flee to the Eye of Terror. But once in a while, they come out into real space to wreak havoc and then go back. In Fabius Bile, we're exploring Fabius and some others who are about to go try to get an Eldar craft world that's somewhere in the Eye of Terror. And apparently, the book's over here, that's why I keep pointing that way. Apparently, this young lady is of a family that fights those that come out of the Eye of Terror, especially Abaddon, the Despoiler. A lot of the Space Marines who betrayed the Empire, the Imperium of Man, they become denizens of the warp, and some of them are even elevated to demonhood at some point. Fulgrim is the most notable example, becoming the Angel Exterminatus. But Abaddon the Despoiler is one that I don't think it's talked about enough. And apparently this is going to be a good set of books to explore that. So I'm excited to get into this book. So today's video was a little different. If you're hesitant when it comes to media, my advice is to give it a chance. Like with anime, I believe in the 3-episode rule. Give it 3 episodes before you decide if it is or isn't for you. Like my stepson, it's funny, we have a lot of similar taste in anime, but he's always recommending shows to me. And sometimes off the top of my head, I'm like, oh, that's not a show I watch. But I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna give it I'll give it 3 episodes to see if I genuinely like it. What Black Library has done so well is create so many characters in such a vast universe that anyone can find themselves. Manga and anime, unless they go on for 900 years, One Piece, you probably are limited in finding a character to connect to. That's why there are so many of them. Like back here somewhere, we can find a character that we love. But never fall into the trap that certain media only belongs to certain people. Once art is created, it belongs to us all. And have fun exploring it. That's why I like to call myself a well-rounded nerd. I grew up with Sailor Moon. And let me tell you, when they remade it into Sailor Moon Crystal and followed the manga story closer than what that original anime did, I was here for it. Why not? The world is catering to nerds right now. Don't ruin it for the rest of us by being that guy. When they redid Fruits Basket, I was here for it. They made another Spider-Man. I'm sporting a Spider-Gwen hoodie right now. Enjoy it. I've got just as many Transformers as Sailor Moon. There's a whole bunch of other stuff besides Transformers and Sailor Moon, but they're just my favorites. Transformers was made for boys. It's a toy. It's made for whoever wants to be creative and play with a toy. That's who it's for, but not these. These are action figures. They stay posed and shall not be touched. But try not to go into new media with a preconceived notion. You know, everything's different. Everything's not for everyone. But before you decide you don't like something, at least give it a good effort. And especially as couples, you know, my husband has media that he loves that I didn't know anything about. But in getting to know him and, you know, going through our dating relationship, I found some new franchises that I love now that he introduced me to, and vice versa. Like, he always liked, you know, grots and orcs because they're little and cute, but now he's gotten into Warhammer lore because of me, because I drug him in there. So it's also something that can enhance relationships. If you and your significant other are looking for commonality in media, explore all of them until you find one that you both love. Like, that's just part of the joy of there being so much out there. So I've pontificated long enough. This video is quite lengthy at this point. If you made it this far, well, good on you. You deserve a prize. But again, thanks everyone for all the recent subscriptions. I'm hoping that, you know, my channel just continues to grow and I get to continue having fun making videos, because for me, this is a little bit of escapism, so I enjoy it, and I'm enjoying having nerdy conversations with people. And thanks also for the advice on some of the painting and stuff I do with figures. I think I'm going to do some Paint With Me's live once I get to the point where I'm able to go live, like, you know, just do some live painting and discussions while I do that. So thank you so much if you made it to the end. And friends, like, comment, and subscribe always. And I will see you in the next one.